All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Liz, and I'm happy to welcome you all here to Art at Home, sponsored by the Hoboken Public Library in Hoboken, New Jersey. I want to start by saying thank you so much to the Hoboken Library for supporting the arts in this time of pandemic. We are so lucky to be able to do art, those of us who are housed and have a location and have internet. We are so lucky to be able to share art with each other. In August, our theme is summer fun, and we have been looking at several artists who do landscape or art out of doors, or as the French call it, art en plein air, in the out of doors. And I'm looking through our list of participants. I want to welcome you all here. I don't think I see anybody new today. I could be wrong. No, so I hope I'm not missing anyone. We are going to look at another French artist, and the format for our class will be the same as the last two that we had in August. We will look at and discuss the art of a specific artist, and then I will give you an assignment and you will be on your own to create art inspired by this particular artist. We're going to look at another Frenchman. His name is Gustave Caillebotte. I'm going to give you Caillebotte. I'm going to give you a little bit of biographical information about Monsieur Caillebotte, and then we are going to look at his paintings. All right, Caillebotte is one of the lesser known Impressionist artists. I find him particularly interesting because of the fact that, how can I put it, his style is rather fluid. He was very good at borrowing from both the more realistic end of the Impressionist style of artists like Degas, and also the more impressionist end of the spectrum, like Renoir, for example, or even the neo-impressionists like Seurat. And we're going to see examples of both styles of his work momentarily. He was born August 19th, 1848. He died February 21st, 1894. He was also a patron of the Impressionists. Caillebotte, similar to several of the other Impressionist artists that we've been looking at, was born into a rather wealthy family, but Caillebotte was possibly the most wealthy, the richest of all the Impressionists. His father inherited a business from his father, a military clothing business, and he was also a judge. So the Caillebotte family was quite well-to-do, and it really helped Caillebotte throughout his life to have been born into wealth. His father was twice widowed before marrying Caillebotte's mother, Celeste de Fresne, and she had two more sons. So Gustave had two brothers. He was born at home. And in 1860, the Caillebotte family started spending their summers in, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, perhaps you French speakers in this class can help me out. I believe the town is pronounced Hyères, about 12 miles south of Paris, where the father had been building a summer home. He purchased a large property, and in 1860, they started spending more and more summertime there. And that's where Gustave began painting. In 1868, he earned a degree, a license to practice law, and he was also an engineer. So again, similar to the other Impressionist painters, he had a career, a professional career, but he abandoned that career. And shortly after he got his degrees in law and engineering, he was drafted into the Franco-Prussian War. And he served in the war for 1 year from 1870 to 1871 in the Garde Nationale Mobile de la Seine. But after the war, Caillebotte decided to start really devoting himself to painting. He studied in the studio of an artist named Léon Bonnat, and he became a very accomplished realist painter. He enrolled in the École des Beaux-Arts, the Academy of Arts in Paris, but he didn't spend very much time there. As with his contemporaries at that time, he became quite bored with traditional art and the style of painting of that time. He took up photography. He became enamored of Japanese art, which was just at that point in time coming into vogue in Paris. And he dabbled in collecting Japanese art and also in this new craze of photography and using cameras. He met at that point in 1874, he befriended and met several artists, including Degas, and he attended the first Impressionist show exhibition in 1874, but he did not exhibit work. He made his debut at the second Impressionist show in 1876. He showed 8 paintings in the first show, including a painting that was quite shocking to the Parisian public, in which he painted the people who laid the tiles in his studio. And at that point in time, that was like, oh my God, you don't paint laborers. You only could paint, the only thing that was acceptable to paint of daily life at that time were farm workers or peasants. So the fact that he was painting the people who laid the tiles in the studios was quite outre and shocking and vulgar. It was classified as vulgar art. And he painted the same painting in 2 different styles. He painted it quite realistically, and then he did a second painting more in the impressionistic style of his colleagues, Renoir and other impressionist artists at that time. He loved his precursors, artists like Millet and Courbet, other French artists who were way more realistic than the Impressionists, and he aimed to paint reality as it existed and the way he saw it. So he had this in common with other Impressionist artists. He wanted to reduce the theatricality that was present in traditional painting of that time. He wanted the common person, the everyday person, to have a relationship with his art. He didn't want it to be something reserved for royalty or upper class viewers. He wanted the art to be something that would resonate with everyday people. So he was trying to create this relationship between the everyday viewer and what he saw as reality. And this approach to art, this philosophy of art, was unique to the Impressionist movement and very new and modern at that particular period of time. Okay. And he borrowed from his contemporaries, as I mentioned. And this, I think, is what makes his work so interesting. So sometimes the work was very smooth and finished, in the manner of artists like Courbet or Degas, but at other times it showed the texture and the thick impasto of someone more like Van Gogh or Cézanne. And he would go back and forth between the two styles. And he would change his palette as well. So when he was doing the more textured style approach to his work, the palette was softer and more pastel. When he was doing the more realistic style of work, he would do a much more earth tone palette. Photography critics or art historians are not really clear about this, but they do believe that photography influenced his work. And you can be the judge of this when we start looking at his images. He did extreme cropping in his work, and it's something that I so love about his work. His perspective is unusual, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. He has a very high vantage point perspective in his work, as if he were looking down from a very high vantage point. And that's very unusual at that period of time. Some people think that is the influence of his interest in photography, and he would crop things in a way that he would chop images in very extreme ways, as if he were looking through a viewfinder when he was framing his composition. But art historians are not really clear on whether that was actually the case. He's most famous for his paintings of Paris, of urban settings, and we're going to look at several of those as well. And sometimes the images are so flat and smooth that they have a photorealism effect. They almost look surrealistic. I think you're going to enjoy his work. All right. Anybody have anything else to add to biographical information about his work? I know many of you like to scout out the artist in advance before class. No, okay. Oh, and I see someone who may be new. Catherine Chang, are you a new student? If you are, welcome, welcome. We're delighted to have you here. And if you're not, welcome back. All right, let's start looking at Gustave's paintings. And it's going to be a random approach to his work because as I said, he was very versatile in switching back and forth between the realism and the more impressionistic style. He did often put people in his work. You can see the virtuosity of his skill when you see how well he reproduced people. Everyone able to see this?
Yes.
Wonderful. Look at the perspective in this image. Pretty awesome. So I'm throwing in some tips about landscape work as we look at Caillebotte, because I think he is one of the great undersung heroes of landscape work. I want you to notice how he makes this figure in the front, in the foreground, so large, so huge, it fills our eye. And that really creates the illusion of three-dimensional space on a flat two-dimensional surface. Notice how wide the boat is at the bottom of the image. It fills the entire horizontal plane from left to right. Okay, the whole side of the boat fills the whole bottom of the painting. But as we go back in space, I'm assuming this is the bow of the boat. The bow gets smaller as we move back in space, as do the sides of the river. I think it must be the Seine. The sides of the Seine get closer and closer together as we converge at the horizon line at the top. So this is a kind of interesting combination of realism plus the impressionistic technique of using individual brushstrokes and letting that texture create the shimmering quality of the light reflecting off the water. Look at the magnificent foreshortening he uses on the hands, clutching the oars. He really exaggerates the size of the fingers to show that the hands are protruding outwards, jutting outwards over the knees. A lot of beautiful attention to detail in this painting. And how much do we love this black top hat and how it's mirrored by this, it might be Notre Dame, this cathedral in the background. Anytime you want to make a comment about a painting, please feel free to share. I'm going to move on. Another wonderful thing about Caillebotte is he supported a lot of artists. He collected his friends and contemporaries' artwork. So he used his money to help his colleagues. Here's the kind of image that he was most famous for. And this is more, you could see the influence of someone like Monet in this painting, those of you who were with us when we were looking at Monet. So the more pastel, the more light colored the palette. I'm going to use the term that Dina Geracia used yesterday that I've fallen in love with. The more brushy this painting is, the less defined and realistic it is. That's what makes this look impressionistic. Again, look at this brilliant use of single point perspective. Everything in this painting goes back to this distant vanishing point on the horizon line, which is way back here. So all lines converge at that point at the end of the avenue. And that goes for the top as well. The tops of these buildings converge at the back. The lines get closer and closer together as we come to the horizon. And this is a trick that the Renaissance invented, the Renaissance artists, to show this depth of field on a flat surface. Larger forms are in the front. As we go back in space, things start to become minuscule and they lose color. They become grayer the further away from us they are. You can see the windows up close, but as we go back in space, they become almost non-existent. And here is that exciting cropping that Caillebotte is famous for. Look at this fantastic diagonal here. This to me is artistic genius. This makes such an extraordinary asymmetrical composition, just this one diagonal here. I think this whole painting would be incredibly boring without this triangle here.
I agree fully, especially from a photography point of view. It's sometimes you feel like it's a piece of like a finger or something if you get a piece of a window, but I agree. I think it makes it so much more alive to just see it's his perspective, and he's painted it so succinctly. It's beautiful.
Yes. And also, how interesting this intersection of streets here, how it softens the urban landscape. It's almost like a human figure. The street becomes almost humanoid. So yeah, this cropping of the landscape, the framing of the viewpoint is what makes it art. The artist's perspective. Again, he's famous for this elevated vantage point, as if he's standing on a balcony looking down. Very few other artists did this at this time. And it's kind of exciting. It's a thrilling place to be. If you've ever been on a balcony in Paris, you know it's probably the best place to look at this city. Cool. Okay. I want to go from his urban stuff to something more country. Okay.
Liz, I could be completely wrong, but from the paintings that I had observed, it's almost like it showed, it represents a lot about the era in that he was of wealth, and being in society was almost stifling. And you see how much more vibrant I feel his shots, including or of nature, especially the rowboats, they're everywhere. They're so much more vibrant, and it just feels like it's, you see a little bit more passion there. I'm not saying there isn't passion across the board, but I just feel like, you know, and the top hats, especially, what a wonderful representation again of the time. And who doesn't love a top hat, right? But anyway, that was my observation, and I wasn't sure if that was off or not, but
well,
I just thought I'd share.
The nail right on the head. I think the Impressionists were working hard to bring art to everyday people. Up until that point, it was reserved for the wealthy. And they were tired of that. They were bored with the very slick presentation, the very refined aspects of the art world. They wanted it to be removed from the wealthy collector and made accessible to everyone. So you're right. He was probably stifled by the bubble that he grew up in, and he was trying to change all that, as well as the rest of his colleagues, all of them. All of the Impressionists were trying to move away from the academy and the traditional approach to art. and their love for color, their love for seeing the world in a way that they felt was more real than the artists who came before them was, and then expressing it on canvas was the way they hoped to achieve that. So I think you're right. Absolutely. So again, here he switched definitely. You can see the influence of people like Renoir or Monet in this image. A lot of those individual brushstrokes that are apparent. Notice how he stays within families of color in order to create the green grass, but he's got lighter greens, yellow greens, blue greens, and he has deliberately not smoothed out the brush strokes because he wants each individual blade of grass to be visible to you. And the way to do that is to allow the brush stroke to be visible. He wants each little pebble in the dirt pathway to show as well. So you can do that by leaving the texture of the brush or the palette knife or finger. If you want to paint with your fingers to do this kind of work, that's certainly a way to go too. Notice the different shades of red in the umbrella. There's an orangey red, a pink red. There may be a pattern on this umbrella as well. It's difficult to tell because this image is so small, but he stayed within the family of reds. He's created shadow by making a brownish red here. Very little black or gray in this image. And that was something else that the Impressionists work hard to avoid. They looked at shadow and they saw color. They did not see gray. So this shadow is kind of a bluish color, and I imagine he used blue with its secondary opposite gray mixed, or orange mixed in with it to create this gray. He probably did not use black. It's a very sweet painting, I think. Very romantic. Very immediate, capturing the moment, the impression of what he was looking at. Very similar to what photography tries to achieve. Many of the Impressionists were influenced by photography. Okay. I love this one. Let's look at one of his portraits. He did do interior space as well, and portraiture. This one for me is very much like Degas, for those of you who've looked at Degas a lot. Kind of wonderful, a little bit creepy, right?
A little, but of the period.
Very much so. I'm not sure who this person is. It might actually be a self-portrait. I'm not sure.
So much detail.
Yeah. And I love the curve of this. The top of the sofa is quite wonderful.
With the carving.
Yeah. And the way the wallpaper is the same fabric as the fabric on the sofa. It's kind of interesting. That was probably of the style of the moment. I like the curve of his mustache, the curve of his hairline, and the curve of the carving on the sofa and here too.
With delicate fingers.
Yes.
And the expression and the face, I am obsessed with hands and eyes, right? Because hands are these little people that do their own thing, but do so much for you, right? And then and then your eyes, they truly are the windows to the soul. And I just am enamored of people who do, or artists rather, who do these portraits. And they're not necessarily, I'm not sure what the size of this painting is, but it doesn't look terribly large. And
Right.
still to get that detail, this guy looks, pensive, possibly depressed of the pressure, I'm sure. I mean, they didn't have Nike back then, right? So it might have been a hot day, and here he is in a three-piece suit, and I don't know. But anyway, I just all of this, the fact that the couch does match the wall, but they are very clearly two separate, perspectives and items rather. So I just love this painting. I had looked at it prior to the class, and I loved it. So mustache, I mean, all of it.
Great. Now here he's used a considerable amount of black, breaking with impressionistic tradition here too, so that's interesting. But then Degas also would have used black.
There's a blue tinge to it, though.
Yes, and certainly in the fabric, it's a bluish black.
Right.
Great observations, guys. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Somehow the sofa looked a little odd.
Well, I think again, it's his use of perspective and the way it was turned.
Right.
Very unusual. So I want to end with one more landscape because that will be our goal today. I want to continue with landscape. There's so many beautiful ones. It's always so hard for me to choose. Let's go with this one. Yeah, no. Let's go with this one. Wish there was a way I could show them all at once. I think I mentioned that every single class, but I have yet to figure that out. So this one is definitely more impressionistic. We have our more pastel end of the palette. Fantastic use of perspective. Here is our horizon line. It is only 1 point perspective. All of our vertical lines converge at the vanishing point here where I have my cursor. All of them are going back here. It's such a beautiful representation of single point perspective. You start wide at the bottom and get closer together as you get back to that vanishing point. Large shapes in the front, even though mentally, your brain is telling you, well, this tree, it's got to be smaller than the hill in the background. But visually, were you standing in front of that tree, it would appear much larger than the hill behind it. And those are tricks that we artists use to help us achieve a three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional flat surface. All right. So our assignment for today is to create a new landscape, or if you started one last class or during the week that you would like to continue working on, that works as well. I'm going to do mine in watercolor. You may use any drawing or painting media that you would like. Because we're doing Impressionism, I would encourage you to work in color, however. So if you have oil pastels, crayons, soft pastels, acrylic paint, watercolor paint, any colored media, colored pencil, any colored media that you feel comfortable with, I would recommend working first in number 2, soft pencil, sketch lightly on your paper, your composition, go for that interesting cropping. Work from an existing photograph, copy a Caillebotte image if you would like. I can put one up on the screen. Maybe I'll put a new one up for you to work on. How would that be?
Good.
And is there anyone who would like me to put up the diagram of 1-point perspective?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to do that first. You folks
Thank you.
gather up your materials while I hunt for that image. I'll show that, and then I'm going to start demonstrating how I do landscape, and you can just go to work. Any questions?
I have a question. I know I don't ever have any questions, but I guess it's a comment more. One of my favorite paintings that I was looking at was the Oarsman, right? Or the Oarsman, I think it's called. But I just loved the vibrancy and the movement of this singular frame of, the day. And I just, again,
Is that the first painting I put up?
I don't think so. Did I miss it?
I don't know, maybe. Is it a single gentleman in a boat rowing?
Oh, no, I didn't miss it. I'm just lunching. No, it's the 2 men, but again, the perspective, one is almost at the top of the front men hat, and then the one in the back kind of has a side profile, kind of a down and to the right kind of a profile. But anyway, I just really like that one. I'll put a link so it's not a complete waste of this explanation, I guess.
He did many pictures of rowers. So I'm glad you found one that you like. So right at the moment, I have the picture of 1-point perspective. And Lauren, are you done talking about,
Am I ever? No, I am done. I'm done. Thank you.
your comments are always welcome, so stop it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's a great 1-point perspective image. Remember, we have a horizon line across, dividing between sky and foreground. And somewhere on that horizon line, you put what's called a vanishing point, 1 dot. And then all of your lines in the image, top and bottom, will lead back to that vanishing point, will converge on the horizon line. All of your horizontal lines will then be parallel to the horizon line. So you see these railroad ties, how they're all parallel to the horizon line. And all of your verticals, your pure up and down verticals, will be perpendicular to the horizon. and everything else will flow diagonally to the vanishing point. So these diagonal lines are the ones that are the most difficult intellectually to grasp. These lines that are the diagonals on the side of the fence here, and the lines on the top of the telephone pole, diagonals appear, are difficult to accept intellectually, therefore difficult to teach. All right. How do we feel about Caillebotte compared to all the other Impressionists? Any thoughts? Before we start working, I'm just curious. Oh, there's a lot in the chat box. Let me see. Oh, Lauren, wow. These are big links. Oh, Catherine, you are a newcomer. Fabulous. Catherine, it doesn't matter. You may be an advanced student. You may be a beginner. This class is good for everyone. And at this point, you can go ahead and start creating your own landscape. If you have a photograph or, I don't know, a magazine picture of a landscape, just go ahead and start copying it. If you want to copy one of the Caillebotte paintings, I'm going to put one up on the screen right now. I'm also going to do a landscape on my easel. I actually prefer, folks, that you not watch me because I think that's inhibiting for you. However, if you are a newcomer and you have never ever painted before, if you feel that it would help you to watch, then have at it. But I really want folks to try on their own and see where it leads you. Art is very much about experimentation and kind of leaping off the edge of the cliff into something new. And you've got nothing to lose. If you don't like it, you crumple it up and throw away, or you erase and start over. Even the greatest artists of all time ripped up, threw away, started over. There's nothing wrong with that.
I have a question
Go ahead.
on approach. So say I'm only working on 9x12, but the image I'm doing has a lot of detail. So I know you did a wash on the background the last time, but how do you prevent the detail from, how do you define the detail from the?
Okay, so remember we work in layers, particularly if you're using watercolor.
That's what I'm using, yeah.
Forget about the details in the beginning. They are the very last thing that I want you to deal with. Details are the final thing you do. You lay on thin washes. You want to let them dry as much as possible. They don't have to be bone dry. And in each layer, you can start adding a little bit more detail. Watercolor, when it's wet, is difficult to control. And you cannot add tiny detail into wet paint. And another thing about detail, if you work with small shapes first, it's impossible to do the background.
That's true.
So do your thin washed backgrounds first, let them dry somewhat, or have a paper towel handy to blot the excess water away. And then when you have a more dry surface, you can work the details in. Does that help?
Yes. And then the only other question at the moment. So I have, like, say, white fencing. So do you use white paint, or do you try to leave the paper white?
My recommendation is that you leave the paper white.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And I love, see, these are the kinds of questions I love. These are the kinds of questions that I'm hoping people will ask. The questions about the how to, this is the time and place to be asking. So now I'm going to put up an image of Caillebotte. I do not have the time or space to do the kind of research, unfortunately, that our wonderful Dina Gracia does when she's doing her art history lectures to you all. So I don't have access, or I have not taken the time to find out the titles of these paintings, but this is a beautiful landscape by Gustave Caillebotte. It is more in the Impressionist brushier end of the Renoir style of painting. And I have deliberately chosen a painting that does not have figures in it. It is all about nature, or at least plant life. There is a building way in the background that I may or may not include in my painting. I'm the artist though, and I get to eliminate what I don't want to use. It's all about my point of view, my perspective. And at this point, I'm going to remind everybody to remain muted if possible. I'm going to be doing as little talking as possible, but I will be describing my steps that I take as I work. I think you can see both me and the painting, I hope. One interesting thing about this painting is it's vertical. Most landscapes are done horizontally. So this is a bit of an anomaly in the world of landscape.
So one of my challenges I have is you mixed your paint first,
I always, yes.
but I have no idea how much to mix in order to do what I'm doing. So it's sort of like, because I don't have the experience. Again, how do you match the color, or it doesn't matter if you need to mix more?
I'm going to tell you a secret.
I need it.
Knows how to do that.
Oh.
And the beauty of Impressionism is because you're working in families of color, it doesn't matter, because you can use a variety of shades of that one color.
You just blend it.
Well, if you mix one shade or tint of green, you can create something close to it and use that right next to it. And that's work for you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
So I didn't miss the point. So when you mix up your paint now, can I just see your palette to get a visual of how much paint you mixed?
Sure. But right now I'm fixing, if you don't mind, I'm fixing my.
Oh yeah. You're setting up.
I'm turning my paper vertically. It was horizontal. But because this image is vertical, I'm setting up my easel first. But sure, once I lay out my palette, I'll be happy to share it with you. But this is something I would recommend you kind of let go and not stress about. If possible. Whom am I talking to?
Oh, Lizzie.
Yeah, Lizzie, try not to worry about this.
Okay. Well, I never actually had any kind of classes, so I don't know the proper way to do
Right,
things.
that's
So,
fantastic.
yeah.
Try
So
not-
I'm thinking I'm missing a lot of points sometimes too.
It's a very good question, and I understand why you're concerned about it. But my answer is try not to worry about it.
Good to know. I have another logistics question. Does it matter if I work flat, which is what I'm used to on the table? Because I see you use an easel.
The only reason I'm using an easel is so that you can see what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter if.
I prefer working flat, especially
Oh,
when it's watercolor or acrylics. So from my point of view, you're working at an advantage working.
hmm.
I'm working at a disadvantage.
I didn't know if perspective was altered when you worked flat versus on an easel.
No, it should
Straightforward.
be easier for you working flat. Easier and better.
Well, you're answering all my things that roam around.
Good, that's my job. Glad to be of help.
I appreciate it.
I love when these questions come up because they're probably questions that everyone has and maybe have not thought of asking. So those are good. And any of you who are teachers probably know this already. All questions are good. So I am now, Lizzie, in the process, and everyone, I'm in the process of laying out my palette. And I've decided to switch to acrylics today because it'll be easier for you to see my colors. To have run out of red. Urgh. Not good timing for that. Okay, so here is my palette, oops, which just got very messy because my violet ran into my blue. But you can see I've just put a dab of each color. And I've arranged my colors according to the color wheel. Blue, red, and yellow are the primaries. Orange, green, and violet are the secondaries. And this is the violet, which I had to mix. It's a pretty messy blob there.
Mhm.
Bottom.
Is that a paper plate?
It's a plastic plate, yes.
Ah, but for watercolor, what's a good thing? Because I find all these little things that are constraining, these little, things that have like the little indents.
Yeah, egg cartons are good.
Oh,
And I like to put my white and black on a separate palette because tend to use a lot of white, particularly when I'm doing kind of an impressionistic style. So here's my white, and I put a lot of white. And I'm not going to put black because remember, the Impressionists used very little black,
mm.
if any. All right. So I'm about to sketch my composition. And I am copying this gorgeous Caillebotte landscape. It is a vertical painting. And the horizon line is quite high up. Another unusual aspect of this landscape. Appears to be it's like a river. Marshland here. A little stream. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is my vanishing point, way over in the upper right hand corner of the horizon line, right at the very edge of the image. There's a beautiful grassy pathway here. Very wide at the bottom. Narrowing to the vanishing point at the top. And some brown grass to the side. A tall, skinny tree here. Skinny tree here. Here. So I've made some errors in my pencil sketch. This is the beauty of sketching out your composition first. I'm not even going to bother to erase. I'm just going to paint over those pencil lines. There's not much color in this painting, so I don't know. I may add color. For my thin washes, I start by using a large brush. Lots of water, very little paint. We learned yesterday with the artist Charles Demuth, or Demuth, as he likes to have it pronounced, Demuth. He saturated his paper. He was such a master of watercolor paint. He soaked his paper. As we would say in the old country, that takes chutzpah. Now here's my disadvantage with working on the easel. For me, everything's going to drip downwards now. Your advantage with working flat on a flat tabletop is you can control where the paint goes. But luckily, I like drips. Sky in this painting is not a true blue. I mixed it with a bit of lavender. With landscape, I like to start at the top and work down. That's your preference. I would encourage you to mix. Again, the Impressionists rarely used colors straight from the tube. I mean, Van Gogh may be the exception to that rule, but he was so different in so many ways. We haven't talked about him in a while. Maybe we should do him one day soon. You know, they had that big interactive show in New York. Many of you have gone to see that. On my wash, laying down my areas of color. No conscious thought about detail yet. Even with a wet brush, I'm still trying to get that textured effect, not smoothing anything. But to achieve that, it's going to require the paper to be a little drier to get a really nice textural effect. So different from last week, I'm using acrylic on watercolor paper. It works equally well as watercolor on watercolor paper. Colors getting deeper the closer I get to the front. More intense. Painting doesn't look like anything yet. I'm not stressed about that. Just creating my composition. Laying down my shapes. Figuring out where different things are going to fit. This part of the process is fairly rapid. A little too bright. shall return, everyone. I need more paper towels. Keep working. Everyone good? Hard. All right. So I've laid down my washes. Paper is in the drying process, and in a moment I can start adding details. I'm assuming everyone's doing okay. As always, if you have a question, feel free to ask, please, or write in the chat box. So I'm at the next stage. I'm going to start using smaller brushes to add details and probably darker, more intense color, because now that the paper's drier, I'm going to be capable of doing that. And in the background, it's a very brushy, bushy area. So I'm going to be using a square brush as opposed to a rounded tip brush, because it's going to enable me to get that kind of furry, hairy texture. It's kind of blue violet. Impressionists loved violet. Dabbing with my brush, keeping that texture visible. Now my brush is drier, not quite so wet. And I'm tinting it by adding white. And I'm in the areas where I feel it's a little bit too dark, I'm overlaying or putting the lighter violet, the lighter tint on top of the darker brush strokes. But I'm not smoothing it out. I'm allowing each individual brush stroke to be visible. That's the Impressionist way. And I'm varying the size of the brush strokes. I'm twisting and turning the brush so that sometimes I have little dabs of brush. Sometimes it's a flat, larger stroke. And they did that to show that things were, hey, different sizes. Do the larger background areas first, always. Details again are always at the end. There's a lot going on in this painting. I thought this was, was I wrong? So we have 5 minutes till sharing, everyone. Keep working. This one is going to require a lot more time than I realized. And that's good. It's giving me renewed appreciation for the Impressionists. And Lizzie, I don't know if it helps, but I'm constantly mixing and remixing my colors.
That makes me feel better.
Always running out, always creating new. All part of the process. And it's a constant process of laying on paint, letting it dry, working on the next layer. I'm always adding. Making corrections, additions, rethinking areas. Okay, so it is darn. Actually, time to start finishing up. I have scratched the surface of this painting. And how much of it you can even see. I've started getting obsessed with the grassy pathway. Used a surprising amount of red in the shadow area. The trees are casting these wonderful shadows. The red and green are complementary colors, so it does make sense. Haven't even tackled the sky yet, but all of that is coming. All right. You folks can keep working for another minute. I'm going to check on who our artist is for next week so I can let you know. And then if you want to share, we'll take a few minutes to do that.
Liz, I'd like to end the program at 12 o'clock today.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And your stories and history of the artists are also totally inspiring and well-researched and wonderful. Thank you. That's my favorite part.
Thank you. But I do not research truth in advertising. I don't research quite as extensively as Dina does. And Dina has the just really awesome advantage of working at one of the greatest museums on earth.
Yeah, that's true.
Just incredible access to all kinds of resources. If you've never been to the Pierpont Oregon Library, everyone, you gotta go. That's where Dina works. All right, so our next artist will be give me 1 minute. I should do this in advance. Ah, It's as if I was reading my own mind. Vincent van Gogh.
Ah,
I had forgotten. So sunflowers, sunflowers, sunflowers. Go to the market. If you live in Hoboken, go to the market next Tuesday. Buy yourself $10. You can buy yourself a bunch of sunflowers. They have really gorgeous ones at the Hoboken market, if you can afford it. All right. So, new rules. I'm going to go call on people as I see you in line on my feed at the top. And Suzanne, you just happen to be our first person today. Would you like to share?
Not today.
Quite all right. Katie. Would you like to share?
Yes, I have something blocking part of my screen, so I'm not sure
We can
how
see.
well it may show.
Wow. Yep.
It's a marina at sunset.
Wow. So I would encourage,
beautiful.
colors are spectacular. Your perspective is wonderful. In your following layers, if you continue working on this, try and use some more brushstroke.
Okay.
If you want to do it in the impressionistic style, but other than
Right.
that, it's really wonderful. I really love the reflection in the water so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, Heather. Okay. Teresa.
I'm not ready, sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize, folks. If you don't feel like sharing, don't. The advantage of sharing is you get ideas from other people. But if you don't feel like doing it, that's fine too. All right, Teresa. Yes. Looks like you want.
Liz, I'm still working on that Miko Endo piece. You had suggested making the sky darker, so I did that.
Yes.
But then I went down, this is from her painting, but then I went down and I took a photo myself of that pier. And so I'm reworking it again with my own photo. The buildings in the background are a bit different, et cetera. I want the tree in it. I want the Empire State Building in it. So I'm just starting again,
Awesome.
that same idea, but with my photo.
I want to repeat to you, Teresa, that you fill in the background first. Doing those tiny details after will be so much.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, if you do the whole sky before you try and do
The
little
buildings?
details, it's going to be easier for you.
Oh, okay. Okay, so sky first, then buildings.
Sky and water first, and then do your buildings. It's a beautiful beginning. And I love that you're doing it from your own photo now. Be inspired by Mika, but I want your style, your personality to shine through. It's beautiful. I love that the gazebo is so big. Really nice composition. Great job.
Well, it's the highlight right now. So thank you. I'll keep working on it.
Good. Enjoy. All right, Nomi. Woo. Oh, so were you looking at a Caillebotte painting? Yes. Yes, I recognize this one. Look at that dramatic composition. Awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Well done. Yep. Spectacular. Keep adding those layers. You're on the right track. Well done.
Thank you.
Doris.
I don't want to share today.
You do not have to.
Okay, thank you. I'm still working on it
That's good. I hope you enjoyed the class.
very much.
Who'd you call?
Esty. Oh, you were working on the same painting I was, I think.
Yeah, but
I like yours better. Nice. I love very vibrant color. Yeah, your colors.
yours is bigger.
Mine's bigger.
I
Mine's
don't
bigger.
know.
I have too much friggin' lavender in mine. I hate lavender. The Impressionists love that violet. They were violet crazy.
Okay, so I
Really
like
precision.
leaving it like that, or erase it, or continue. We'll see.
Keep working on it. Add layers.
Okay.
Is your partner in crime doing art? No? Okay. Suzanne said no. Heather said Pat. Can't see it, Pat. Move it more in the middle. Yeah. Woo. Ooh, look at that. So interesting.
I was away for vacation in upstate New York, and this is what I look at, and this is supposed to be ski trails.
Beautiful. Those are ski trails, the dark lines coming down.
The light line's supposed to be, but I'm working on it. My daughter said it's too wide.
Yeah, well, my one suggestion would
But
be,
they have a lot of wild.
I missed, you're breaking up. But I think your daughter may be,
Yes. Oh, okay.
that would be my one suggestion. So going from the dark to light seems a bit abrupt. You might want to smooth the transition from dark to light,
Mhm.
blend it a little bit more. Otherwise, beautiful.
Okay. Thank
Great.
you.
You're welcome. All right. Katie Cohen. Did you say no already? I'm sorry.
I already went.
You already went. Okay. So Robin, you're next.
Hi, I knew I couldn't do this, but I tried it anyway. This is the photograph. And the perspective and making things, you know, at a
It's
distance.
lovely. Look at that.
The comparison, it's not finished at all, but
Bring it a little closer to the screen.
if I can, I've got all everybody's picture on the top, so I don't know if I can make that go away, but it, you know, it's a big bush in the front, and then it's way back over the water. It's all kind of
Reflection.
yeah. So anyway, it didn't have the perspective in the painting that the photograph had, and I knew it was a challenge, and it's almost all green. So anyway, I wanted to try it. I mean, I can bring it way up close, but that's only part of it.
I think it's lovely. I think you should keep working on it. And newsflash, everyone, no one knows what you're looking at. You're the artist. You can change. You can take out, you can put in, you can add, you can subtract. It's all up to you as the artist. When we were looking at the artwork of Charles Demuth yesterday, what I found fascinating is what he left out of the picture. He frequently left things out of what he was looking at, because it was interesting because Dina, the lecturer, showed us photographs of what he painted, and he left stuff out deliberately, and that's fine. He did it for aesthetic and compositional reasons, and sometimes that's what makes the painting really beautiful.
I was so sorry to have to miss that yesterday, but I had an appointment that I had to go to. So it's good to hear you talk about it.
She'll do more. Don't worry. Okay, so before we share any more art, I want to put my email address in the chat box, and anyone who has not given me their email address, I want you to know that I send out an email to everyone a few days before class so that you have advance notice of the artists we're going to be talking about, and you have a chance to gather supplies should you need them. Oh, Rima, too bad. Sorry about that. So I know, Catherine, I sent you a message in the chat box. I don't think you've seen it. If you want to give me your email address, you can send it to just me in the chat box, and I will put you on our email list so that I can let you know in advance about next week's and following art classes. All right, so next in my queue is Stephanie. Would you like to share? We have exactly 1 minute left.
Sure. This, can you see this?
Yep, that's the picture you worked from.
Yeah. It's not that great.
Terrific. All right, keep adding those layers. Fabulous
Okay.
perspective. Yep. Awesome.
Like the colors.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Lauren, you are next. I'm going to race through now. Sorry, Stephanie.
That's okay.
Oh, it's 12 o'clock, Lauren. Where are you, Lauren? All right. You're muted.
How about now?
Good. Really?
I think I'm gonna scrap this and start over, but I was doing,
Oh, I remember this Caillebotte painting now. Yep, I know this one. Beautiful.
yeah, it's not terribly recognizable, so.
What I want you to do, hold on to this one, start a whole new one.
I
Then
think I'm gonna start a whole new one. This feels like it was a practice in the way the colors meld. Like, I have to do this before I put down a wash, otherwise it turns green. And this, I mean, it needs more shaping, but again, I think I'm gonna go closer to what he had than my free hand, I guess.
looks brighter than what he probably used too.
It's so, like you said, there was so much more to this painting than I thought. And I mean, there's a lot going on, but I didn't think it would be like a when I started. So, but that's my painting. I'll send you the next one that I'm working on.
Everybody, before we say goodbye, and I'm sorry, Catherine, you were next in the queue, but we have to leave. You can always send me JPEGs, okay? Please. Conchart. Hi, Catherine. So, oh, Catherine, all right, really fast. Heidi's not here to kick us off.
I'm here. So I'm just gonna stop recording, Liz, and then you can end it for everyone, okay?
Oh, all right.
Hopefully that will work and it will start downloading on my computer. So bye, everyone. I'm off to another program.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye, Heidi.
Bye.
Love the hat.
You.
Bye, Heidi. We
you.
love you and your hat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hoboken Library. Woohoo!